Hi there, and welcome to OCDTV. I'm Keith Martin, along with Steve Day, Nikki Barnes, and Joe Grandrus, and we'll be talking about movie sequels today. The good, the bad, and the one that just kicked your childhood right in the teeth. So we'll get started here with Steve. What do you got?
Well, first of all, for a good movie sequel, I have to pick Aliens. Or I think we're legally required to call it James Cameron's Aliens now.
Okay.
As with all of his movies. And one thing that James Cameron, I mean, he's known for making these great original movies that make lots and lots of money, but he got his start doing sequels to other people's movies, and one of the best was Aliens. Now, when you have a movie like Alien, which was really successful, directed by Ridley Scott, who always makes masterpieces, and you put that in the hands of a new director, the expectation is it's going to be a piece of junk. And that didn't happen because James Cameron directed what would become the #1 movie of that year. And probably sticks out in the minds of fans as more memorable.
I find Aliens Alien was kind of more of a horror movie, where Aliens was almost more like an action movie.
That's the common assumption.
Yeah, the first one. The first one gave me nightmares.
Definitely, me too.
It kind of scarred me for a lot of Alien movies further on.
So the second one was more for, you know, cool quotable lines.
For a sequel, I picked a less traditional sequel, and I picked Serenity, a sequel to the short-lived show Firefly. It was heartbreaking when it got canceled, and I was very excited, to say the least, when it got its own movie. And whereas a lot of the fans weren't happy with the ending of it, it at least got an ending, and I applaud Joss Whedon for what he did for it. He brought it back to life, and that has to be my favorite sequel.
Yeah, except I'm still very upset that he killed Wash.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That was
spoiler alert.
Too bad.
That was heartbreaking.
If there's one thing that Joss Whedon is known for, is killing off beloved characters.
Very true.
In franchises.
That's true. He's done that in almost every single show.
Every project he touches, he kills someone the audience likes.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I think I speak for everyone in nerd culture when I say he is beloved as if everything he touches turns to gold, despite being canceled by Fox.
Yep.
Indeed.
All right, for my movie sequel, I picked The Dark Knight. Batman Begins, fantastic movie, even though with the previous entry in the Batman franchise, they totally could have called it in. Batman Begins was a wonderful movie. The Dark Knight was a worthy sequel. You had the classic Batman villain in the Joker. You had a great, epic, Gotham-destroying plot. There's very little you can dislike about that movie, I feel.
The movie that I like is not really, well, a lot of people wouldn't even think it was a sequel. Desperado. Because most people probably never had seen El Mariachi, which was made on
actually an excellent pick.
I know, but you know, El Mariachi was made with like $5 and
no, it was made. He paid for it. Robert Rodriguez paid for that with a 3-month stay in a research hospital, and he filmed it on borrowed equipment. And when he was given the budget that you would expect for a movie like that, he made Desperado, which blew everyone away.
Right, and you know, and with the the cast with Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek, and,
Steve Buscemi.
Steve Buscemi is my favorite part of that movie. He's awesome. How about some other movies like that I necessarily wouldn't really, I don't call them sequels because I kind of view them as one big story arc in a way. You know, if you look at anything from, you know, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and the prequels included, you know, Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, I almost look at that to myself. I'd see it as one big movie. You know, it's when you watch them all together.
Yeah, they're strung together as one narrative.
Right.
I would make the argument that the prequels are a sequel to the originals, given that we had to wait 16 years.
Right.
But
then, you know, and so yeah, and then like movies like the Lord of the Rings trilogy there, you know, I don't see those as sequels to each other. I just kind of see it as, you know, a big giant movie.
Yeah,
they were actually filmed like one big giant movie too.
yeah, the next epic chapter.
How about talking about good movie sequels?
What about sequels that were better than the original?
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Well, that's kind of how I feel about Aliens.
Right, that's kind
Star
of
Trek 2.
Yep, Star Trek 2, Wrath of
A
Khan.
sequel both to a movie and an episode.
Indeed. Exactly. I think, you know, other than maybe, you know, I'm going to sound a little heresy right here, but other than the reboot that they just did for Star Trek, which I think is actually better than any of the other ones, personally, myself.
It's actually a pretty
Sir, that is
opinion.
blasphemy.
Yeah, I know. But, yeah, blasphemy rather than heresy. Wrath of Khan is probably the best of the original Star Trek movies.
That's the consensus, I think.
Yeah.
And another, you know, in terms of Star Trek, if we're talking about sequels that were better than the original, the second Next Generation film, First Contact, was much better than Generations. Probably the best of the 4 Next Generation films.
Absolutely.
I think.
Yeah,
I think.
well,
I think
Generations,
there's no
I
question
wasn't
in
a
my
big
mind.
fan of Generations, really, but I did like
I loved
Generations
it.
was
Contact.
disappointing. It disappointed original series fans because Kirk wasn't in as much of the movie as people had assumed. It was basically a Next Generation movie with a couple of guest stars.
Right.
And Next Generation fans probably wanted something more, I don't know if cerebral is the right word, but I'm going to use it anyway. I can't speak for how well it did at the box office, but whoever was disappointed in Generations cannot possibly have been disappointed by First Contact.
No, I think the consensus amongst fans is that First Contact is an excellent Star Trek movie, and only the most die-hard miscreant pessimists would be the type of people who wouldn't believe that First Contact is a good film. Despite some continuity tweaking, which in the end isn't bad as long as what you've got is a good narrative.
Oh.
Not even as much continuity tweaking as you'd think, but that's diverging onto a different topic.
And with Star Trek, there's no such thing as continuity. I mean,
Well, there wasn't.
they stomp all over their own continuity repeatedly all the time.
Well, no, they fixed that in the novel series.
well,
You've got to be really hardcore. I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm wearing the shirt, but I'm not.
Yeah, he's more of a Trek fan.
A sci-fi franchise with a huge extended universe. Keith, wouldn't you hate something like that?
No, that's why I love Star Wars. You know, not entirely a huge fan of the expanded universe, most of it, but for the most part, though, you know, anything that's kind of set within the movie timeframes, I'm a fan of, and anything older Republic stuff I like.
Yeah.
Because then you can do whatever you want back there. It's 4,000 years before the movies. You can beat the heck out of because it doesn't matter. They say, well, it happened like 4,000 years ago. Anything could have happened between now and then. How about something just for a little lighter stuff, like Back to the Future?
Right.
Oh,
What about?
forgot about those.
Well, that's another movie I would consider one longer narrative than sequels.
Right. Well, because
Except the fourth one.
there wasn't
There
a fourth.
wasn't a
Back
fourth
to
What's the
Future
one that
movie.
what's the Western one? That's the third
That's
one?
the third.
third one.
Yeah.
Oh, I was
Well,
not a fan
I would
of
call
that.
Back to the Future 2 more
think
like a
you were-
sequel.
Mayor, a twinkle in your father's eye.
Yeah.
Well, see, I'd consider it one longer story, like the
I'm not
Lord
sure
of the
if
Rings or Star Trek's 2, 3, and 4.
I'm not sure if he had that idea though when they first started to think about number 2. You know, and then they said, "Oh yeah."
I'm not sure.
there you go."
I can't speak to the
It's
history
just
of that.
because it seems like when they did 2 and 3, you know, it was like, oh yeah, and then I have an idea to wrap this up here.
2 and 3 were shot together.
Right.
After the success of the first Back to the Future, it was clear that there was potential in the franchise, and they were shot really close together. In fact, the reason they did that was because Michael J. Fox was had really tight scheduling with family ties, and so they decided to release them within 6 months of each other. The general consensus amongst critics is that they were inferior to the original, but having gone back and watched them again with my son, you know, they do stand up. I mean, they're not as good, but they do stand up and hold the test of time. It's still a really fun series to watch. So.
2 was always my favorite, but I love time travel shenanigans.
Still waiting for Mattel to release those hoverboards.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I thought I'd have my hoverboard by now. It is not fair.
Yeah, hopes and dreams.
Hopefully somebody will be watching this show and be inspired to give us our hoverboards.
So what do we think is the best sequel to, you know, just out there, like, you know, not necessarily critically, but just like, when you look at a sequel and go, you know what, that sequel had to be made, you know.
Like ends had to be tied up.
So in terms of a sequel that was exactly what fans wanted?
Right, it was like, oh my God, that was perfect. That's exactly what we wanted.
If you were to ask me to fit that category, I'd have to say Star Trek 2. Because the first one was kind of cerebral, didn't really strike a chord with audiences. It was kind of a disappointment to most of the fans, too.
Yeah.
And then
Well, it
when they
messed with the formula a lot. Characters were out of character. The plots were not understandable.
And they waited 4 years.
To be honest, it just kind of bored me to tears.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
A lot of people felt that way, and when they completely reorganized it for Star Trek 2, and they made something exciting and fun that was pleasing, I think, to, you know, new audiences and original fans, as evidenced by its box office success. I think that's exactly what you want in a sequel, something that trumps the original.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we're talking sequels that had to be made, I mean, now especially it has to be brought up Avengers.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
There was
That's a
no
perfect
possible
example.
way they could not have made that.
But is Avengers really a sequel, or is it like a kind of a
Collaboration.
standalone that they kind of, you know, took the? Because
Okay, I'm going to be pedantic and say if Serenity counts.
No, that's not what I mean. As if not if it counted, but I'm just saying. When we look at movies like that, you know, do we consider them sequels? You know, in general, not just for the format.
It's debatable, I would say.
Well, they fought the
'Cause
same
obviously-
villain who was the villain in Thor.
So, okay.
And it was the same MacGuffin
Right.
that was in Captain America.
Right. So
Really,
it
I
could
think
be a
what we
sequel
need to
to all
call
those
it,
movies,
I think what we should call it is like a megaquel.
there you go. You coined the phrase. Bam. Stamp it. Steve.
Or a superquill, if it's superheroes.
There you go.
Superquill, that sounds like a really big feather pen.
Stamp it, Steve. Bam.
I think one of my favorite sequels that I think is better than the first was Darkness Rising.
Wow, that's really obscure, but yes.
Yeah, that's very obscure.
I absolutely love that movie.
Yeah, there's a situation where the original was a college film where they had a
Yeah,
group
oh
of
yeah, I
kids.
know.
You had a group of kids sitting around playing D&D, and in the sequel they had a bigger budget and managed to, I don't know, film it in the woods and around a Renaissance festival and really
But
produce something.
it's still low budget and it's still goofy.
Yeah, it's
and
Okay.
like that's how I've
really
seen
funny.
my group of friends for years.
But whom would you
Thank
be
you.
speaking of?
Thank you.
I don't know.
I do. I got another one. The Dungeons and Dragons sequel,
The made-for sci-fi,
which was better than the
filmed on
big
a
budget.
shoestring, but
Yeah.
Which was better than the big budget original.
only by the argument that it was more accurate to the game.
And just better.
Did they
Yeah.
actually
Did
roll
not-
dice before getting into fights?
Well, no, but it didn't involve a Wayans brother, so
Which helped a lot.
I don't think any mention of good sequels can go without Spider-Man 2 and X-Men 2, X-Men United. From both a box office and critical and fan response, those are all considered superior to the originals. Maybe not our favorites, but
Now, when people start thinking about sequels too, like obviously when they come up with the reboots, you know, which is the rage right now, you know, just I think a lot of people actually almost consider them sequels, even though they're not, and we know they're not. But
I think people who aren't fans of the movies would call them sequels.
Right.
But there's definitely a distinction between reboot and sequel, I would think.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I
Would you call The Dark Knight a 30-year sequel to Batman and Robin from the 60s? No.
No, not at all.
No.
I mean, I would, to be a jerk, but
Right. Yeah.
but I wouldn't mean it.
I'm rather excited for Total Recall.
Yeah, it's another good reboot. Let's go. Let's see, where are we at for time? No, the
Throwing the signals.
I've been locked. Go ahead. Somebody.
Should we
Ace
move on?
Ventura 2, When Nature Calls.
You know, I like that movie.
That movie was amazing.
Okay, good. I thought you
That was
were,
the last
thought you
movie
were
we're-
down
Jim
it.
Carrey talked out of his ass for.
But you know he still does that a little in his
That
personal
was
life.
Oh,
right
he does that at
before he
home.
moved on to Truman Show and
Mm-hmm.
Also great movies,
More
but
artsy.
I
Ace
love
Ventura
Truman
2,
Show. It's great.
it was funny.
It was amazing.
It was a great plot
I don't like Ace Ventura.
for
at
a
all.
Jim Carrey movie. Well, you're
I
objectively
loved it.
wrong.
Okay. Well,
It-
I agree.
if you say so.
taught us all what guano was.
Yes. No, I already knew what guano was from playing D&D. Thank you.
D&D
That was-
taught
that
us a lot, especially
did.
about courage.
Indeed.
And honesty.
I was referencing an X-Files episode.
Right.
Oh, I was being serious.
Okay.
That's
People
why
watch
I
the
only
X-Files?
play good alignments.
The only thing you can count on your players to be honest about is fighting with each other over all the best stuff and completely derailing whatever plans the
I
dungeon
don't
master
ever
has.
fight with people for this stuff. Do I fight with you?
I think this is a topic for another
Yeah,
episode.
I think that'll be our next episode, if we have one.
We'll have one. I think we're doing pretty well.
How about sequels that that didn't quite live up to our standards?
Bad sequels.
Indeed.
Well, are we talking about sequels that are just bad or sequels that are really bad?
Well, these just bad.
Just bad?
Yeah. Well, why don't we work with just bad for now? We'll get really bad in a little bit.
I think, in my opinion, a sequel that fits that description, and some people would disagree with me and feel that this film is much worse than it is, would be Highlander 2, which was a movie whom nobody involved.
That would be the next category for me.
Well, I'll explain to you my position on this, is that it's in fact so bad, it's such a perfect example of how not to make a sequel, that it ends up becoming funny. When you watch it, you can enjoy it for how bad it is. Within the first 12 minutes of that movie, they completely rewrite the mythology of the original film as if they hadn't watched it and had to make something up for the plot.
Exactly.
And that's and that would normally be really awful, but as a film, it's such an embarrassment to watch that it ends up becoming funny. And so, in my opinion, because it's 20 years later, here we can sit down and laugh at it. It's become sort of the butt of nerd jokes in the entire community. That elevates it from abomination to just bad, because you can have fun sitting down and joking around about it, as opposed to not being able to watch it at all.
It makes my eyes bleed. I can't watch that movie. I've seen it like twice, just because you have to. Because the first time you watch it the second time just because you can't believe it was so bad the first time.
Or you watch any of the recuts that they did in an attempt to.
Oh yeah, the attempt to
improve
fix it. The director's cut. Yeah.
No, the director pulled his name off.
I know, because he was embarrassed.
There was a producer's cut and there was a renegade.
Right, the renegade version.
I'm not sure
Right.
who the renegade was. Maybe he was
I think that was Mulcahy.
that might have been the best boy or something. I don't know.
Yeah, some grip who walked by and picked something up.